Good afternoon and welcome to the second session of This is Film, Film Heritage in Practice, edition 2021. My name is Giovanna Fossati. I'm the chief curator of I Film Museum and a professor at the University of Amsterdam, where I focus on topics related to film heritage. This is Film is a collaboration between I Film Museum, the University of Amsterdam, and the Amsterdam School for Cultural Analysis, and it started in 2015. It is, in particular, a collaboration with the master students of the This is Film class at the University of Amsterdam. The students help introducing and interviewing our guests. And so I would like to welcome the 29 students following This is Film this year. This is the first time that we are making the series available online. During the lockdown, due to the current health crisis, we had a chance to set up an online alternative to the series. This is not only a solution for the temporary closure of the museum. With the online series, we also want to respond to the many inquiries we had in the past years from followers abroad who asked for an online access to the lectures, discussions, and screening we present during This is Film. The lecture and Q&A will be available on the I website for everybody for free, while the films that are screened during the series will be available on the I's streaming platform, the iPlayer, for a small fee. As a manner of framing today's theme within a broader context, I would like to briefly sum up how the digital turn has impacted film. Two of the most dramatic changes impacting filmmaking and film archival practices in the last decade have been the so-called digital rollout, which around 2012 has replaced analog film by digital film in the distribution and in the cinema projection, and that happened in most Western countries, and the disappearance of film manufacturing as an industrial practice. Case in point, Kodak, the biggest and one of the oldest motion picture film manufacturer, filed for bankruptcy in January 2012. Kodak managed to survive, but it was drastically downsized. The consequences of the digital rollout have been multiple. The production of film stock has rapidly decreased, leading to the downsizing of film manufacturing, the disappearance of many traditional kinds of film stock, and the closure of many film laboratories. All of a sudden, a whole branch of the film business revolving around the post-production of film strips, including activities spanning from film processing to film printing and all related expertise, quickly became obsolete. Within the archival community, there was a rising concern that practices, tools, and expertise related to traditional film post-production would disappear. Thus, a number of initiatives were launched to keep laboratory equipment and expertise in existence, for they were still deemed necessary for archival purposes. Think of film restoration and exhibition practices. And they were seen as an integral part of film heritage from a historical perspective. With the disappearance of a variety of film stock and the closure of film laboratories, film archival practice also started diverting more and more to digital alternatives. Alongside digital restoration and access, digital tools and media had to be adopted as a means to preserve the growing collection of digitized film-born films and new-born digital films. However, despite a drastic change in balance between analog and digital, with digital being the new standard in film production, distribution, and exhibition, and becoming predominant in film restoration and overall archival practices, analog film tradition is still very much alive. Indeed, it still serves as the basis of film practice and is essential for understanding, restoring, and preserving film history. Parallel to the fast-moving digital turn in film production, distribution, and archiving, a new phenomenon has emerged that can be referred to as the material turn. Within filmmaking and film archiving, the material turn indicates the renewed interest in traditional film. While the film industry workflow from production to distribution and projection has rapidly shifted to digital, a niche movement of filmmakers and artists has emerged that privileges the use of photographic film and advocates keeping its production alive. One of the first to voice this trend publicly was UK artist and filmmaker Tacita Dean, on the slide. In response to the decision by the last laboratory in the UK to stop processing 16mm film in 2011. In an article published by the newspaper The Guardian, Dean passionately argued that film is still the core of her art, as well as that of many more like-minded artists and independent experimental filmmakers. This desire of maintaining traditional film industry as a specific means for artistic and creative productions was shared by many makers, artists, and archivists alike. Later, a similar plea came from a number of Hollywood filmmakers who still want to have the option of working with traditional film. Like Tacita Dean, they believe that both analog and digital tools should coexist, as they together offer more creative choices to the filmmakers. Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, and J.J. Abrams were among the well-known film directors who joined forces to promote an agreement between Hollywood studios and Kodak to ensure the traditional film production. In 2015, Kodak finalized the agreement guaranteeing, for the time being, that filmmakers can continue to shoot on analog film. Shortly after that, Kodak introduced a new Super 8 camera, another sign of renewed and widespread interest for analog technologies. So I would like now to move on to our theme today and introduce Elaine Cullen, Vincent Kliphuis, Mike Phillips Gomez, David Versteeg, and Bogna Bohinska, who are students of the This is Film class. So on behalf of the group now, Elaine will introduce our guest.
Thanks, Giovanna. I'm delighted to be introducing today's guest, Jens Meurer, a Berlin-based director, producer, author, and the co-founder of Egeli Tossel Film Production Company. He studied at Balliol College in Oxford, Sciences Po in Paris, and at Columbia University in New York. Jens's first job was as a sports reporter and sub-editor on the West Rand Times in South Africa, and he began his career as a documentary filmmaker at the Leningrad Documentary Film Studio in 1990. He made documentaries across the Soviet Union, South Africa, Israel, and the USA. In 1995, he was awarded the European Academy Award for his work, and his 1999 documentary about the Black Panther movement, Public Enemy, premiered at the Venice Film Festival. He subsequently moved on to producing, where some of his illustrious credits include Oscar-nominated film The Last Station, Paul Verhoeven's Black Book, Golden Globe-winning series Carlos, and films such as Filth, Rush, and Big Game. In 2002, Jens produced Alexander Solukov's one-take masterpiece Russian Ark, which was the first digital film screened in competition at Cannes, and as Jens commented at the time, it kind of marked the beginning of the end of chemical film. However, in 2013, Jens returned to his documentary roots when he started work on the ambitious and impossible project, our film for today. Filmed over several years, the documentary follows eccentric Austrian entrepreneur Dr. Florian Kaps, known as Doc, during his endeavors to save the last remaining Polaroid factory in the world and what happened as a result. A romantic by nature, tensions start to bubble when Doc's deep love for analog clashes with the business model needed for it to survive out in the world. In comes Oskar Smolakowski, the intern engineer turned CEO of Impossible, who believed that Impossible could be less about saving the past and more about adapting analog into today's digital world. The film thus explores the renewed desire for analog media in the digital era and the need for authenticity and tangibility as our senses become warped by this digital deluge we are facing. However, Jens carefully balances this tension between digital and non-digital through Doc and Oscar's visions for the Impossible project. A global production that travels between Berlin, Vienna, New York, and around the Netherlands, Jens promotes the digital versus analog dichotomy through the lens of an Arriflex 35 film camera, an essential feature of the documentary. Apart from the obvious link of telling a story about the reclamation of outdated analog forms via real film, Jens argues that the thinking and focus required is almost liberation from the tyranny of just let it roll digital. Finding solutions for the filmmaking on 35mm is an extension of what the documentary itself is about. The film was first screened in the Deep Focus section at the International Film Festival in Rotterdam in 2020 and has since received an array of positive reviews, including one from 60 Minutes, who hailed an Impossible project as an inspiration not to give up on the things that we love, no matter how large the odds may seem at success. The analog revolution of the past decade is certainly in full effect, with vinyl sales increasing yearly, Hollywood filmmakers like Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino opting to shoot on film, and of course, the exponential popularity of Polaroid, Fujifilm Instax, and film cameras, particularly among the children of the digital age who missed out on the analog experience growing up. Jens's film ultimately invites us to fall in love again with tactile, real things and asks us to contemplate the importance of all five senses and how we navigate through these digital times. Jens is currently putting the finishing touches on his next documentary, Seaside Special, a tragicomedy on Brexit and the world's last end of the pier variety show in Norfolk, in England. He will then be starting on a feature film about the siege of Leningrad and The Canadian, a refugee thriller set in northern France and England that will be shooting around Belgium and Ireland. But first, Jens has very graciously joined us today in the Film Museum for today's session. So without further ado, join me in welcoming Jens to the floor.
Hello, Giovanna. Hello, everyone. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here with me in person and you in person. I know there's 25 of you or so out there at the other end of the iPhone, so hello to you as well. But to be able to show a film here today at the Eye, what a great place to show a film, and we're showing it on 35mm. It's not a full cinema, you've seen, it's kind of a weird pandemic version of a full cinema, but to me it seems fantastic and very, very full. So thank you for having me and my film today. So An Impossible Project has been around a little bit now because it premiered in Rotterdam about a year ago and was invited to be screened here at the Eye, and the pandemic started and we thought, well, next year for sure we'll do it as it should be. So, you know, it's still waiting to really get onto screens everywhere in the world. It has been a few times. And so I can gauge a little bit what the reactions to the film are. And maybe by way of introduction, I should say that, yes, my film is shot on film. It's shot on 35 millimeter, which is not normally how you do documentaries these days. And it does show you and invite you to appreciate a lot of analog technology and thinking. But it's really not nostalgia. For me, it's a very futuristic project, and in a way, I think quite a political one in this day and age. And by that I mean, I started following the story of Doc Florian Kaps, who was the guy behind saving the last Polaroid factory in 2008, just in the same time as Steve Jobs had introduced the iPhone. It was completely swimming against the tide. And I met him a few years later and his team at a company called The Impossible Project. And I just loved the idea of that there was somebody who's telling us, hang on, don't throw all this old shit overboard because the iPhone, people were queuing for phones. How crazy was that? Around the block when the new one got introduced. I just really like the idea that there's somebody who's telling us to think about this again and maybe hang on to some of the technologies, but it's not just the technologies, it's also the mindsets that came with analog things like writing letters, reading books, reading a newspaper, taking photos that actually are physically printed afterwards, seeing films that are made on film. And as our world and my filming moved more and more into a crazy time of fake news and of alternative facts, I felt it's more and more appropriate to cling to things that are actually tactile and real. And that's what I mean by all means, when you see my film, which is warm, and it's got music. It's all done analog, of course. Do fall in love with it, but keep in mind that it's really a lesson in there might be a time when you just have to slow down. You might want to think a little bit more about what you do. Same as writing a letter by hand or a diary or something like that forces you to just slow down and think about it a little bit. You can't just upload it. And I think that's a more and more topical thing as this time goes by. We've just spent a year all behind digital screens, communicating with one another over social media and Zooms. And my God, am I ready for having a drink with somebody and a conversation? And I think that's a little bit where my film fits in. It's also unusual for a documentary, as in it's not a scandal. It's not a third world problem. It's the whole world problem, that we're all addicted to social media, that we're addicted to this convenience, as somebody in the New York Times wrote, the tyranny of convenience. We're all using WhatsApp and Facebook and can't get away from it because it's supposedly free and everyone's doing it. But at the same time, there's a real danger of these possibilities undermining our society, our human interaction, democracy. So in that sense, with a pinch of salt, I think An Impossible Project is futuristic. And it is also futuristic when I started shooting this on film. To a large degree, I was never going to do this film about people who reinvented and brought back Polaroid on a digital format. That just wouldn't be right. But to do it on 35 millimeter came from my early co-production partners, Ari. The guy who's in charge there of film and post is called Sepp Reidinger, and he said, if you do this on film, don't do it on Super 16, the hitherto standard medium for the documentary. Do it on 35, not because it's better than digital, but because it'll hold its own in a very different way to digital. The whole process will hold its own compared to how you make films digitally. So Doc's project was called The Impossible Project because he couldn't call it Polaroid at first. Now it is Polaroid again. My project is called An Impossible Project because everyone told me too, why fucking shoot a film on film? It's crazy. Can't you just let it die? Well, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to see, is it possible to make a proper film on film? And I mean, that's the end of my introduction. Now I'll let you be the judge of that.
Thank you, Jens. Thank you very much for this introduction. At this point, I'll start with a couple of questions, and then I'll open to the questions from the students. So I'd like to tie back in a little bit of something you already mentioned about the political dimension of your film. So in a way, your film can be put in relation to that material turn I was talking about, to the choice made by some of artists and filmmakers to filming on 35. But at the same time, you are talking about it. So you are really talking about analog technology, and so your choice is not purely aesthetic. And I just understand now that you came to choosing 35 later on in the
No, I did it right from the start.
Right from the start.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So can you tell us a little more about that political agenda, and also if you have other projects in mind following that same thinking?
Yeah, look, the people who restarted Polaroid, which is after all a factory, the last one is here in Enschede in the Netherlands. I mean, I think they're heroes. And it's not just Doc. It was a group of people first linked to the factory, and then a quite young group of people. They had the headquarters in Berlin. Now it is here in Amsterdam, who are all digital natives. And what I loved about it, I wasn't a Polaroid fanatic. I liked that there were, especially the young people amongst them, who said, hang on, who's to tell us that we can't do this differently? You know, we love the idea, in this case, of having photographs that are real, that can't just be reproduced endlessly. They can't just be up and downloaded. They take a while till you hold it developed in your hands, and they're expensive. But this whole process generates something of value, because thinking has gone into it. You have to just, if you're shooting a Polaroid, you're not going to do it like your iPhone, 15 pictures. You'll think about each picture. And I love to discover that there are people into that process. And I believe that swimming against the digital tide, and, I'm not a Luddite. I produced Russian Ark, which is kind of a digital milestone, if you want. I think it's more and more necessary that we discover that it is possible to stand up to this deluge of kind of digital overload. And that's not because digital is bad, it's because too much digital is bad. And it's not healthy. We're missing too much. Everything digital is always just behind a glass screen, or you hear it. But, humans have 5 senses at least. We also smell, we taste, we touch. And you never have that in digital. And I think excluding that from our lives is kind of opening the path for the Donald Trumps of the world and the Orbans and so on, who are very good at manipulating us on the surface. And how do you resist? Well, you resist by being more human and being more somebody, sensical, using all your senses. So, big words, but here were people doing this. So easy. I start pointing a camera at them and I'll follow them. That's it. And I think to see what has evolved there, and Polaroid is back. I mean, how unlikely is that? That's political. I mean, it's hopeful. We're all in this pandemic time, and seemingly the world is the sky is falling. Actually, the world is in a pretty good place, and we have a great opportunity to, if we just focus on what is good between us, to improve things. And that's why I think my film is a bit weird, because it's not the problem somewhere in the rainforest. It's right here in our cities. It's all of us, 4, 5, 6 hours glued to our smartphones every day. And it's trying to show that there is an antidote to that. Yeah. And it's fun.
Thank you. My next question moves to a completely different area, that of archives. So I'm asking that really from the perspective of an archivist. You are the producer of the first truly all-digital festival hit with Russian Ark. And now, 20 years later, you have made a 35mm film. Do you ever think about their archival life? In other words, how do you think these films, both the digital ones and the analog ones, will be preserved by archives, and how would you like them to be shown to an audience, let's say, 50 years from now?
Well, that's a very good question, because the real truth is, and I made a little documentary about this, is no one knows where the original of Russian Ark is, or if it still exists. Because Russian Ark was, of course, recorded onto hard disk, a portable hard disk system that was 2 terabyte. It was massive at the time, and it had to be portable. And then it was transferred from that. So no one even really knows what is the original of Russian Ark. It was ultimately in Cannes when it was premiered. It was premiered both as a digital projection and as a 35 millimeter projection. So there is a negative that was made. The negative, we know where it is. What is the original digital? We don't know. I mean, it's crazy. I'm the producer. I couldn't tell you exactly where it is. You know, we've moved companies. The company had different owners. Post-production took place in several places. One of them went bankrupt. And, you know, it is a bit of a kind of unusual film in the history of cinema. The original is unknown. There are versions of it. And that tells you a lot about how long digital is going to last. It ain't.
Thank you about that. I think the good thing is that we know how to preserve 35, so that's not going to be a problem for an impossible project. So now I'd like to give the word to Bogna for a question.
Hello, my name is Bogna, as Giovanna already said, and I have a question for you that's more about the film's origin story, I would say. Because a filmmaker is also a storyteller, so I would like to ask you, did you know from the start that you want to tell the story of Doc, of the Don Quixote, the analog Don Quixote?
Yeah, look, what happened is I had a long hiatus from not doing documentaries, mainly because my wife said, while we had small children, you can't just piss off and disappear for half a year. So I kind of had to produce feature films. And I met Doc at a time when I was working on a film about another very illustrious and charming and very charismatic and impressive Austrian, Niki Lauda. I was the German co-producer on Rush, Ron Howard's movie. So when I was introduced to Doc, I thought, here's another Austrian who's a bit crazy and funny and dreams and really has power behind those dreams. So that to me was attractive, and I just started filming with that. I didn't really have any finance in place, and I hadn't made a documentary for a long time, so I didn't even know any commissioning editors and so on. And that kind of continued to be a problem in an impossible project. But of course, I didn't know which direction their story would go. And at the time when I filmed, their impossible film was pretty rubbish. You know, it would take, I know the first packs they gave me to try out, well, nothing happened. And I thought, you know, nice try. I just put them away, and it was only the next day that I was going to chuck them away. I saw, oh, there is a picture. It took so long to develop. So I liked the against the odds craziness, which is actually an unfair word because it was commitment and vision. Not just Doc, but also Oscar, his father, you know, the whole team who pushed this forward. So I started following it whenever I had a bit of money. Yes, it was done on 35, and there was a question of how can you do it? But that was part of my process. You know, when I first shot in New York, I had to find somebody who rents the camera. Turns out it was possible. It's not like shooting a film on 35 millimeter was an invention. It's been done for 100 years. It's easy. I'd done it. So it was more like, are people still doing it? And as you can see in the film, they are. But the origins were not at all knowing where this would lead.
So a bit like the impossible project itself. You just wait to see how it
ask my wife about it, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I would like to ask Vincent to the stage with his questions. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, I have
Vincent.
a question about the digital dedoxing part of the film. Because I have a kind of notion about Polaroid, nice shirt by the way, that it's kind of a precursor or a hybrid between the digital and analog, because it satisfies the instant gratification part of the digital, because it prints immediately, but it functions like a black box. You don't know what's going on inside, and you get an analog result. So my question, in a sense, is: were you toying with this idea already in the preliminary phase before the film, and that's why I decided to do Polaroid? Or am I just talking out of my ass?
No, you're not talking out of your ass at all. In fact, you put your finger on something that I'm really pleased that you're mentioning. My film is not some kind of last hurrah of analog. It's ultimately very much the process, as I experienced it, is about maintaining more possibilities, or the analog and the digital possibilities. And that was part of my process from word go, because and I think for very good reasons, we recorded the image on film, but the sound was recorded digitally, as it had been, for 20 years before already. No one has really been using a Nagra for a long period of time, and I didn't, I'm not a fetishist, so it wasn't like we had to have a Nagra on set. The one sound guy in Silicon Valley did bring one once. I'm editing on a non-linear editing system. I've been doing that since 1990. So it's more of a best of both worlds experience, which I think in the way you describe Polaroid, you really have that. And I think I have that in my film as well. And, my film does exist as lots of cans of film and 5 reels of the actual film. And there will be a vinyl version of it, which I'm really looking forward to. But it also exists on hard disks and is online on Vimeo, and you got it here. You'll see it on film here today, but it's also digitally. So I think the lesson is there's something to be found in both the variants, and this brings me to my prop. So when I was fundraising for my film, I sent out emails with PDFs attached, like everyone. And my friends teased me and said, you blah, 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 analog, you're sending out PDFs. So I got everyone in the office to get a typewriter, and we started making, fundraising books that are just little books, piece of paper. The good thing is they last. You can, do all sorts of things with them. But in them are... these are done on something called the Instant Lab, which is a Polaroid invention, or this new Polaroid invention, where you can use your iPhone to create a Polaroid of an image that's in your iPhone. So these pictures are screenshots, 35mm of my film that I screenshotted off the computer, put into my iPhone, and then turn into Polaroid so I would have them physically.
Okay, yeah.
I rest my case, or your case rather.
Yeah. Okay, great. Oh, nice answer. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hello again, Jens.
Hey, Mike.
Hi. Got 2 questions here. One is from a colleague who can't be with us today, David. He is unfortunately in quarantine due to everything. So I'll be asking this question first, followed by my own. And I'd like to apologize to David if I lose any sort of sentiment while asking this question. He would like to know, can you tell us more about your analog workflow on this film, as far as, while watching the film, and of course its focus is on analog, you can't help but to be aware of the process of shooting the film and what that must have been like for you. So if you could talk more about what film you used and how that sort of selection process went, and maybe the difficulties you faced while shooting an impossible project.
Well, it's a totally typical analog process, as it used to be until, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We are shooting on film, so on 35, that means we have a slightly larger camera, a larger case of lenses. It means that you ideally have a 4 or 5 people team, where you have a clapper loader, a first camera assistant, a camera person, sound, and somebody trying to make sense of it all. So that's a bit bigger than this, unobtrusive, I'm just video. You have a limited amount of stock, because it does cost money. And it's heavier, it's more visible, it takes, from the word go, more decisions. For example, before you go filming, you have to plan what film stock you take. So unlike on a digital camera where you can change the ASA. Here you actually have film rolls that are for daylight, that are for artificial lights, that have 50 ASA or 500 ASA, so you kind of have to have an idea before what you might be filming during the day. If you work with an experienced camera person, you also know that you can work around it because you can push film, you can filter, the film stock, you can filter the light to fit the film stock, all of which creates an extra level of adrenaline. And it's something that I totally enjoyed, I have to say. And it's not like, most of our films recently have been digital. I think the whole process of even, getting those orange boxes from Kodak. And for us, a typical day would be that I'd have 8 rolls of film, say on average. And they are short rolls, so they have just over 4 minutes of film at 24 frames per second on them, cinema. And you get them in these nice paper boxes, and they're orange. It's this Kodak color. And you know that they're valuable. And it begins, this sounds bonkers, right? So just bear with me, but it does have this adrenaline thing, as in, once I've exposed those 8 rolls, I go home, we go to the pub. There's nothing that we can still shoot. So it follows on that you try to plan a little bit what you're doing. There's a process, for example, since you're doing sync sound, you have to hit a slate before each take. But in a documentary, that can be obtrusive and it takes a bit of time and film, so there are ways to work around it. For example, you do finger snaps and so on. So there needs to be some kind of fluidity to the team doing this. And one of my most enjoyable experiences in shooting this way is that you think, and there's this idea that the video camera is so unobtrusive, and it's the fly on the wall, and the cinema verite. It's in this kind of film, we're not undercover somewhere in a war zone. We are with people whose real lives we're portraying. But I found that somehow there's a magic effect that just by the protagonist noticing how much care, hopefully, goes into recording their lives, there is a kind of relationship that builds, which I think in a documentary is really enjoyable and valuable. And people, they are part of the story, whatever anyone tells you about cinema verite and so on. If you're there with a camera little, often I think people hate having the small camera because they don't know if they're being filmed or not. In my case, they kind of know when we're filming, and it leads to a much more relaxed atmosphere. So it's not like big camera equals, oh, you can't really move. I think it opens doors and creates a good bond. And in a weird way, so the workflow of that bit of the filmmaking, which is analog, is really quite liberating. The whole idea that once those 8 rolls have been shot, you're done for the day, you're free, is fantastic. But having said all this, then you do record more sound. For example, if something really important hasn't been said or been recorded, you record it on sound, and that's digital. Sometimes it's just the iPhone, and you take it to the editing room, and you put the two together, and you have off-camera interviews or something like that. So in the end, I'm sitting in front of 3 computer screens for a year and putting it all together digitally.
Very nice, very nice. My follow-up question, this kind of takes a bit of a lateral turn. I was very much interested in when you visited in the film Otto Nemmens, or aka the Hollywood camera guru. So I was just curious if you had any sort of anecdotal memories or stories that he must have shared with you while you spent time with him there.
Well, we visited Otto Nemmens, which is the name of his company as well, because we needed a 35mm camera in Los Angeles. And Otto is, not 25 anymore, so he's not in the office at his desk each and every moment, every day. But when he heard there's some documentary people wanting to rent a 35mm camera, he came in to see who the fuck are these people. And, he's Austrian, friend of Arnold Schwarzenegger's, and he he loved that we're doing this. So we got a good price and we got really great equipment. You see it in the film, they're using film cameras all the time. So it was fantastic seeing in Hollywood that there is a place, and it's not the only one, where they really are doing film on film. That was the good bit. The bad bit was something that I couldn't film, because Otto tells me a great story, which is, I think he's been married 3 times or so. And his first wedding was when he, followed Arnold to the United States in the 60s or 70s, whenever it was, and he got married to his first wife. It was in Las Vegas, of course, and there wasn't anyone there but the guy in the chapel and the guy who took the Polaroid. And he said, when they then divorced, everything was gone with the first wife and so on, except the Polaroid from the wedding. And I said, Otto, I got to have it for my film, and he couldn't find it anymore.
The irony.
But yeah. I mean, it's. I think the real why he's in the film is to show it's possible. If you want to shoot a film, there's this place. There's a place in Minneapolis. There's a place in New York. There's a place in Berlin. There's a place in Amsterdam where you can make a film on film. So, I hope people keep using it.
Thank you, Jens. I'd like to call up Elaine for the anchor.
Hi, Jens. So at the end of the film, you mentioned that you planned to shoot your next film on 16mm, which we now know to be your upcoming documentary, Seaside Special. So I'd love to know, how did the process and experience of making an impossible project on 35mm and spending time with this variety of analog technology and the people who have this deep adoration for analog, how did that kind of influence or change your own relationship to filmmaking or to analog itself?
Well, look, in a way, you can also tell by my age, I didn't suddenly discover analog filmmaking. I just made a decision that I didn't want to be told that I can't do it anymore. And in order to keep that possible, one has to make a decision that one keeps using film. For me, that decision was very, very easy because, as you gathered by now, I think it is a really good possibility to have. It doesn't mean it's right for every film and for every budget and for every subject matter. But I do think it's a very healthy and literally liberating option to have, and therefore it must be utilized. So, I think for the next film I shot, Seaside Special, it's a variety show at the end on top of a pier 15 meters above the North Sea, where twice a day throughout the whole summer season, the whole winter season, they're putting on a really wonderful, amazing, very British variety show. So to film in a place where you have singing, and it's kind of like a Bollywood documentary, there's lots of singing and dancing and Brexit. That did work quite well on film as well. My films, I am allowed to say this here, they want to be seen in a cinema. And they all look great on an iPhone, I can promise. But they want to be seen in a film, in a cinema. And I think that, as Star Wars, J.J. Abrams are shooting films for the cinema that are merchandised in whichever possible way, there is a reason for doing it on film. So I think in the documentaries I'm doing, you can see the same thing. And everything I said so far, it's a routine. It's not really difficult. It takes a bit of thinking differently. I think in a way, shooting digitally would really benefit from thinking about it a lot more, because it's not like you couldn't turn off a digital camera, except just no one does it, whatever they say. And these I have 1,000 hours of footage in my editing room. I have 25, and there are disadvantages to it. Of course, you have rollouts at the wrong moment. Whatever I said about going down to the pub after you shot your 8 rolls. Of course, there were moments when we would have died for a 9th roll. So, there are low light situations that. You can almost always shoot on film, especially on 35. There's always something on there. But it becomes something that you have to work around and live with. But in Seaside Special, they're films for the cinema, and they're also, I think, I have a weird experience with festivals, because it's not like maybe the expected. We're going to Iraq or somewhere where things are really terrible, and showing a problem, which is, of course, a documentary's job in many ways, but mine are much more roundabout. And if you see Seaside Special, you think you just want to love these Brits, except that they're telling us to fuck off and the European Union. There is kind of an issue, and weirdly enough, that works well, shooting that kind of thing on film. At least that's what I believe. That was a weird answer, but...
No, it's great. Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to hand us back over to Giovanna now to wrap the session up. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you once again, Jens, for being here with us today. I'd like to thank Bogna, Vincent, Mike, Elaine, and David for being with us today and asking Jens your questions. I'd like to thank the 25 students following us at home. Thank you to the crew at Film Museum. So I hope to see you back for the next This Is Film session on the Afghan Film Archive with filmmaker Ariel Nasr as our guest and his recent film, The Forbidden Reel, about rescuing Afghan film history. Thank you and see you soon.